Hi, welcome to On the Couch Conversations with Muki. Today I have an exceptional woman conversing with me. She's a friend of mine, Diana Liagoba Lukandwa from Uganda. Diana, welcome to On the Couch Conversations with Muki. I'm so excited to be talking to you. We've met in the US in 98, 99, and we are friends, and we still are good friends. So Diana, if someone would walk up to you and ask you, who is Diana? What would you say?
Thank you, Muki, and I'm glad to be sitting on your couch virtually. And thanks for that kind introduction. For a question like that, if someone found me today and asked me who I was, of course that has changed over time. But I would start off by saying that I'm Diana and I'm a Ugandan, because that identifies me immediately. And then I go on to say that I'm now in the US and I'm a mother, I'm a wife. Being a Ugandan and talking about that root for me is what starts everything for who exactly I become later.
So Diana, you talk about being Ugandan, and that's what, identifies you. Why is it so important? When you are in the US, you've been there for so long, but you still feel the need to identify, with Uganda.
So I say I'm Ugandan because after coming to the US, and yes, you've mentioned I've been to the US. I came here in 1997. I did win a green card lottery, which is an exceptional, it's like one of a kind chance, because the numbers are so, the probability of winning is just vast. And here I was, I got it. Thank God for my aunt and uncle. And once I come here, I come at the age of 19. And that is such a tender age that one could either get lost in the US or lose yourself because you can't culturally transform into this system, because there's a real big cultural shock, because now you're grown up, you're becoming a woman. And so saying that I'm Ugandan first helps me tell somebody that be aware. I may be multicultural because I've been here over 25 years. And so that helps me grind any conversation we're going to have thereafter.
Okay. So Diana, what was the necessity for you to apply via lottery, to get a green card? Because I believe your childhood was a happy childhood in Uganda. So what happened for you to decide that now you have to go overseas?
That's a wonderful question. So, like I said, at the age of 19 is when I came to the US. So prior to that, when I was growing up, I grew up with both my parents and my siblings. It was a very happy family. They worked hard. We had everything we needed as children. And then at the age of 12, my dad succumbed to his death. And that changed the economical provision in my home. My mom was only a secretary for the local government. And so with 6 children to feed and take care of, she couldn't keep up with. So my dad dying kind of defined what would happen, what happened to us, thereafter, well-being and everything. So it brought in a lot of family members, and most especially my grandfather. He took up such a good position as a dad and kind of took away a lot of weight from my mom. And like I said, I was 12 when my dad died. So 2 of my older siblings, one was 13, another 14. And then I had 3 younger ones at that time. And they were young enough. The youngest was 3 years old. So she was a young mom. And at that time, with all the struggle, my aunt and uncle, who lived in the US, stepped in to come help. And I can only, after living here, I can understand that I think every year after that, they started applying for the lottery. But like I said, it's a chance to win. So if they pick you out of many. So they must have tried so many years. And at 19, imagine he died when I was 12, is when I won the lottery. And at that time, my mom had also just passed. And this was like a chance of a lifetime, you know, because we were struggling. I had just started university when I got this chance. And so coming to the US was like a new page for me and my family, my siblings as well.
So now you are in the US, and I met you in 98. You were working 2 jobs, and Estella and myself asking ourselves, why does she have to work? Because I've got a scholarship, she's got financial aid, and you know, are working 2 jobs. Just tell me about that determination. You know, what was behind that?
Okay, so when I came at 19, I wouldn't be adopted. So I was an adult. And because I was an adult, I had to declare my being an orphan. And because of that, I got a grant. So no, I didn't pay for school, just so you know, I had a grant. I paid for nothing. My books were given. I didn't pay for a thing. All my college, I didn't. But remember, I had my other siblings in Uganda, and I had to help. My mom and dad here, who are my aunt and uncle, you know, they simultaneously became my mom and dad, naturally. And so when I came, I had to contribute, kind of help. I could work, so I got a job, and my first job, I used to bag groceries. And with that money, I would help maybe pay something here, something there, you know, and then my actual contribution for when we sat down with my parents was to continue paying for a mortgage that my late mom left in Uganda. So that was why I worked so hard. That mortgage was high. So, yeah. So I continued to work because I had those siblings to help. We had a mortgage and we had to feed them. So I could help them.
Then you qualified, and I know that your mom wanted you to have a qualification. And tell us about that journey in terms of the qualification you had to honor your mother, and then your ventures afterwards.
Sure. So when I was growing up, I've always been artistic. You know, I always drew. I was exceptional. And so my mom wasn't the artist. My dad was. And so she always said, Hannah, you should always do art. So on her dying bed, I saw her, she died on a Saturday, but on Wednesday, she said, you know, you should do art. So we were waiting for the results for where you would be placed. I shouldn't be crying, but this makes me cry. She said, you should do art. So I said, sure, I think I should do art. So anyway, she died right when they said I had been accepted to the university, you know, but the majors were not distributed. And then later on, they said, oh, Diana, you qualify for social science, which was my third choice. So I went in, I did social science. I thought, you know, this is it. This is what I've been given. So I did social science, and a year into Makerere University, which was where I went, I won the lottery and I came to the US. And coming to the US, it's like a clean palette. So you have a chance of a lifetime. You could be a mathematician, even if you weren't in Africa, or if somebody said you couldn't do it. So I actually did that. I came to the US, and my dad asked and said, Diana, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do art. And he said, I don't know anybody who has done art. I don't know where you would work after that. But deep down, I knew why I was doing it, you know? So I went to St. Cloud State. I was so good. I did it well. I passed so highly. And a year and a half into St. Cloud State, I transferred to a very good university. I went to the University of Wisconsin, which is it is a great university. And I finished my degree in art and graphic design and animation. And I actually got a job as a marketing specialist. So I continued doing my logo development and catalog design. I did very well, but I couldn't carry it on. So yeah, the pressure, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do the pressure, but I felt like I had honored my mom that way. I have it. I have a certificate, and it doesn't beat that. But I'm not practicing as a designer. I'm not working as one, but I'm doing something that fulfills me.
Yes, let's talk about nursing. And I want, before you talk about nursing as well, or as you talk about nursing, I want you to bring in Victor into the picture.
Yes.
Because, you know, somehow along the line you got married, you had kids, and so how did you get to nursing?
Sure. So after I graduated, our relationship became very strong once I moved to Wisconsin. And sure enough, after I graduated, I moved in with Victor. And he was my friend, and he's been good to me. And so we got married. But before we got married, we had a child. And once I became pregnant and continued to do graphic design, I just couldn't keep up. I couldn't wake up. I'm not a morning person. And I thought to myself, there's got to be something. And while I was in university in Wisconsin, I was a nursing assistant. And I liked the schedule and the flexibility of that, the nursing. And so I just dropped what I was doing, and I went back to school and started doing one class at a time and started being a nursing assistant, which was a wage cut, if I could tell you, maybe 5 times the wage cut. But there was something about feeling fulfilled as you go to work and come back home. And then the pressure on the family wasn't there because you work a few days, you're off a few days. So there was a lot of flexibility, and that allowed me, and let me just say, because of Victor, it actually allowed me to do what I've done. Because he wasn't asking me to work so hard and help with the family. So I was able to chase that part of my dream. So I started off as a nursing assistant. I went to a licensed practical nurse, which is here in the US, they call them a low-paid nurse, which I don't understand, but yeah, you have low-paid nurse. And then I slowly went up as I had another child after my low-paid nurse, as they call it. And I decided I'll go do my RN, which is a registered nurse. So I went on, I got that registered nurse certificate. And after I did that, I joined a hospital, started working. I loved it. And I remember when I started working there, people were telling me, that hospital, they don't really do well with Black people. That has been the story for me. Everywhere I have been, maybe except for St. Cloud, maybe wasn't meant for me, but I've thrived somehow. Because I remember when I was going to nursing school, people said, Black people don't graduate there. And let me tell you, every program I have gone to, I have graduated. No fail, none. And so when people come to me and say, should I do nursing? I say, go, because your story is not the other person's story. It's you. You have to go in with yourself, forget what happened to this person. Because I remember when I was going to do nursing, somebody told me, the head of department actually failed me. Be careful, she's going to fail you. And when I got into that program, that same head of department is who held me up. So, like I say, everybody has their own outcome, but I have since done that registered nurse. I did my bachelor's in nursing, and currently I'm in research, which is, yes. And so, so I had transitioned after working with some research patients at work. I kind of transitioned, and, in my nursing career, I kind of reached the plateau, if you can understand, because I became a charge nurse. And after being a charge nurse, the next step would have been becoming a manager. And that to me is political. And that's where I know I wouldn't have done well. So having reached that and being offered that position and, some opportunities, I kind of withdrew and went the research route. So I'm almost in the middle of my master's in research. I'm doing my internship, which is actually my job. And so that should be done this December. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talking about, you're talking about being versatile, because you started off, doing graphic design and then nursing, and now it's research. But you also touched on something that I think is intriguing in terms of people telling you that here people fail. What was it, in you that you think made you thrive?
I go back to that Uganda story, So my background, if anybody knows me, I'm bold. And it's kind of like what you see is what you get. And I have learned over the years, because I'm really tall and I'm not a small person, I smile a lot. So I always say, I'll just kill them with that. And they will not be intimidated. They will know that I'm here for good. And I'm telling you, that has helped me a lot. You know, people say, oh, she's approachable. But I know that if I didn't smile, because, you know, Black people here in the US, we are judged before given a chance, that's for sure. And so I do a lot of that. I do a great deal of that. And what you said, that whatever story is, yes, that may be the truth with the numbers, but there's always an exception. So we always have to do whatever we do knowing I could be that exception. And in my life, I've been that exception. And I believe, like I tell my children, do not go by what's happening in the US. You gotta write your own story, you know? The numbers could be saying this, but what is your story, you know? And so you chase that.
Yeah. And this brings me then to my question about someone who is sitting, they could be sitting in Africa somewhere, in Uganda, or in South Africa, or in the US, and they listening to your story. What would be that one thing that you would tell them, you know, in terms of writing your story, you know, being determined, being flexible, you know? So, and you said it takes you back to Uganda where you started. But what would you say to that little girl who's dreaming to become something?
That little girl needs someone to hold her hand, first of all. If you're not given a chance, you can't become anything, because what do you know? Someone has to show you something. I always, when I go to Uganda, I always, maybe I overthink a lot. But you know, when you go to the rural areas and you're driving in a car and you go somewhere and then come back from wherever you've come from, I always tell my husband or whoever I'm with, and I say, you know, this is kind of like being stuck in life, you know, because some of these people, like the people that you drive by as you're driving and you see their life, they've not seen anything, so they don't know beyond that boundary, you know. So for a Ugandan little girl, you hope somebody can lift them up, you know, because on their own, they will not know. We all have to have somebody, something to look at, you know, because if you can't see, like I tell my my kids, I have my uncle Daudi, I don't know if you met him, but he's a professor in University in Maryland. And he's big, his major is languages. He's so good at linguistics. If he writes so well. And Ethan is always, when we go to Liam's, he says, how can Uncle Daudi become a linguistic after living here? And I said, you know, when I was younger, I tell him that when I was younger, I used to read Peter and Jane books. You know, that was a series when we were young. Peter and Jane did this, Peter and Jane, they're playing with the ball, Peter and Jane. So when you read something, you get out of where you are and you get into that book, you know? And so my Uncle Daudi must have lived in Williams, I'm sorry, but his life was outside of that environment because he articulates English. I'm not kidding. Like anytime he writes, I want to read. I have so much respect for that because he took that language and took it out of where he came from, where he couldn't have really had that chance. But somebody showed him something. And he then took it to the next level, you know? So it's like, give me a chance, and then I'll take that and run with it. So for a Ugandan girl, somebody needs to hold. In the US, they need a hold, but they have exposure, you know? So you hope someone is not, you know, like covering that little girl in the US, because that little girl in the US has better chances than a girl in Uganda. But it depends on who is raising this child, who is giving them an example, who are they seeing, what are they watching on TV, you know? So all those things will determine what one's life will turn out to be.
Wow. So having good role models is something that, you know, every little child should have. So that brings us to the conclusion. Diana, thank you so much for your time. I know that someone somewhere is listening and is picking out something from this conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Muki. And thank you for bringing my memories back. I didn't know I could write my biography. So good. Thank you.
There you have it, a conversation with Diana that really brought us good example of a role model and people to look up to. So thank you for viewing. We will talk to you some other time.